The discovery that changed everything. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the quantum radio telescope data streaming across her monitor, her coffee growing cold in her hand. For 3 weeks, the signal had been there, hidden in the cosmic background noise like a whisper in a hurricane. Most researchers would have dismissed it as equipment malfunction or random interference. Sarah had spent 6 years listening to the universe's silence. She knew the difference between noise and a message. The pattern was too precise, too deliberate. It repeated every 47 hours, each burst lasting exactly 3.7 seconds, carried on a frequency that shouldn't exist according to known physics. The signal originated from a point in space labeled only as Sector 7 Gamma, a region so empty that survey missions had stopped mapping it decades ago. "You're still here?" Dr. Marcus Webb entered the observation room, his reflection appearing in the dark window overlooking the telescope array. "Sarah, it's 3 in the morning. Whatever you're chasing can wait until..." "It's a mathematical sequence," she interrupted, not looking away from the screen. "Prime numbers, but arranged in a way that suggests dimensional folding." "Marcus, someone's trying to tell us something, and they're using math that's at least a century beyond our current understanding." Marcus moved closer, his skepticism visibly crumbling as he studied the data. He had been Sarah's mentor for a decade, and she had learned to recognize that particular expression on his face. It was the look of a scientist confronting something that rewrote the textbooks. The message within the message. The Global Space Administration's emergency meeting convened 18 hours later. 15 nations, 40 scientists, and one impossible signal that had turned Earth's astronomical community upside down. Sarah stood before the assembly, exhausted but energized by the weight of what she was about to propose. "The signal isn't just a greeting," she explained, her presentation filling the massive screens behind her. "It's a key. The mathematical sequence, when properly decoded, creates a 3-dimensional map. Not of space, but of quantum probability states. They're showing us how to build something." Admiral Kenji Nakamura, representing the Global Defense Initiative, leaned forward in his seat. "Build what, exactly?" "A receiver," Sarah answered. "Or more accurately, a quantum entanglement communicator. They're not sending us messages from across space. They're showing us how to tune into a conversation that's happening outside our dimensional framework." The room erupted in questions, objections, and theoretical debates. Dr. Helena Volkov, the Russian Federation's lead quantum physicist, raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Chen, are you suggesting that this signal is an invitation to join some kind of galactic communication network?" "I'm suggesting," Sarah replied carefully, "that we've been shouting into the void for a century, not realizing everyone else is having quiet conversations in rooms we didn't know existed. Building the impossible." 6 months of international cooperation followed. The project, codenamed Echo Protocol, consumed resources and political capital at an unprecedented rate. Conspiracy theories flourished online. Religious leaders debated theological implications. Meanwhile, in a secure facility beneath the Arizona desert, humanity's first quantum entanglement communicator took shape. The device looked nothing like traditional radio equipment. It resembled a sphere of crystalline lattice suspended in a magnetic field, surrounded by quantum processors that hummed with barely contained energy. Sarah had stopped trying to explain it to non-physicists. Even she didn't fully understand the principles that made it work. They were building from instructions written by minds that grasped physics the way humans understood breathing. "Final system check in 30 minutes, Marcus announced, his voice echoing through the facility. "All personnel to stations." Sarah took her position at the primary monitoring console, surrounded by screens displaying data she had memorized over months of preparation. Her hands trembled slightly as she initiated the pre-activation sequence. Around her, 50 scientists held their collective breath. The activation itself was almost anticlimactic. No dramatic surge of power, no Hollywood special effects. The crystalline sphere simply began to resonate at a frequency that made everyone's teeth ache. Then, the monitors exploded with data. First contact with the network. The incoming information was overwhelming. Not words or images, but pure conceptual data that bypassed language entirely. Sarah's consciousness expanded to accommodate understandings she hadn't possessed seconds before. She saw the network, a vast web of civilizations spanning galaxies, all connected through quantum entanglement, conversing in mathematical poetry. There were thousands of them. Species she couldn't name, from worlds she couldn't imagine, all engaged in an ongoing dialogue that had been happening for millions of years. And they had noticed Earth's presence the moment the device activated. One consciousness reached out, distinctly different from the background chorus. Sarah felt it examining her, gentle but intensely curious. Then, a concept packet arrived, translating into her thoughts with crystalline clarity. Welcome, young ones. You have taken your first step into the greater conversation. We are the archivists of the seventh spiral. We have been waiting for you. Sarah managed to form a coherent thought response. Waiting? Why? Because your species possesses something unique. You call it stubbornness. We have a different term, the endurance echo. You are the species that continues when logic says stop. You build when reason says rest. You hope when evidence says despair. This makes you valuable to the conversation. The weight of knowledge. The data transfer lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, Sarah collapsed into her chair, her mind reeling from what she had learned. The network wasn't just a communication system. It was a repository, a library containing the accumulated knowledge of 3,000 civilizations spanning 8 million years. Medical history that could cure diseases humanity hadn't yet discovered. Engineering principles for traversing impossible distances. Philosophical frameworks for questions Earth's greatest minds had barely begun to ask. Art and music from beings who perceived reality in dimensions humans couldn't see. But there was also a warning, delivered with gentle but unmistakable firmness. The conversation is not free. Access requires contribution. Each species must offer what makes them unique. Your stubbornness, your refusal to accept impossibility, this is your currency. The network needs problem solvers who cannot be discouraged. But be warned, some problems in the universe are dangerous to even contemplate. And once you begin contributing, you cannot unhear what others share. Marcus appeared at Sarah's side, his face pale. Did you get the same warning I did? About the silent zones? Sarah nodded slowly. The archivists had shown them regions of space where civilizations had vanished after accessing certain knowledge. Not destroyed by external forces, but unmade by understanding things consciousness wasn't meant to grasp. The network had safeguards, but they were imperfect. Some questions had answers that were themselves weapons. Humanity's choice. The Global Space Administration meeting that followed was unlike any in human history. Sarah and her team presented everything, the wonders, the opportunities, and the existential risks. The debate raged for weeks. Some argued for immediate full integration. Others demanded complete withdrawal, shutting down the communicator and pretending they had never received the signal. A few suggested a middle path, careful, measured engagement with strict protocols about what knowledge they would pursue. We can't just ignore this, Sarah argued during the final session. For the first time in human history, we know we're not alone. We have access to answers we've been seeking since we first looked at the stars. Yes, there are dangers, but when has that ever stopped us? Admiral Nakamura countered, when the danger is existential. When one wrong question could unravel human consciousness itself. Dr. Volkov, who had been silent through most of the debate, finally spoke. Perhaps that is exactly why we should engage. The archivist said we possess endurance, the ability to continue when others would stop. Maybe humanity's role in this conversation is to be the ones who ask the dangerous questions, who probe the boundaries because we're too stubborn to accept limits. The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would join the conversation, but cautiously. They would contribute their unique perspective and benefit from the network's accumulated wisdom. But they would establish boundaries, ethical guidelines, and psychological screening for anyone accessing potentially dangerous knowledge. Sarah returned to the facility that night, watching the crystalline sphere pulse with barely visible light. Somewhere in that quantum entanglement, thousands of civilizations were talking, sharing, growing together. And now, humanity had added its voice to the chorus. She thought about the signal she had first detected 6 months ago, that whisper in the cosmic hurricane. It hadn't been a message. It had been an invitation to something far greater than first contact. It was an invitation to join a conversation that spanned the universe, where humanity's greatest weakness, our inability to accept defeat, was actually our most valuable strength. The summons. 3 years after joining the conversation, Sarah Chen had become fluent in the mathematical language of the network. She could parse concept packets from civilizations so alien that they perceived time as a spatial dimension and space as a choice. She had contributed 37 solutions to problems that had stumped the network for centuries, earning humanity a reputation as the species that wouldn't quit. Which was why, when the archivists of the seventh spiral sent an urgent summons specifically requesting human input, Sarah felt both pride and deep unease. The concept packet arrived during her night shift, and its intensity nearly knocked her out of her chair. This wasn't the usual gentle exchange of ideas. This was a crisis signal, encoded with urgency markers she had never seen used before. Dr. Chen. The conversation requires the endurance echo. We face a problem that has consumed 12 civilizations who attempted to solve it. They are not dead, but they are no longer capable of coherent thought. Their consciousness has fragmented across probability states. We believe humanity's unique cognitive structure might allow you to succeed where others have failed. But we must warn you, this problem is dangerous simply to understand. Sarah immediately contacted Marcus and assembled her team. Within an hour, 20 scientists gathered in the facility's main chamber, all of them veterans of 3 years navigating the network's knowledge base. They're asking us to look at something that's already destroyed 12 civilizations, Marcus said, his voice heavy with concern. Maybe this is one of those boundaries we should respect. Or maybe, Sarah countered, this is exactly why they wanted humans in the conversation. We're the species that looks at impossible odds and says, "Watch me." Dr. James Morrison, the facility's xenopsychology specialist, raised his hand. What exactly is this problem? Sarah pulled up the initial data packet. It's called the recursive void. A region of space where reality itself is failing. Not collapsing into a black hole or experiencing dimensional instability. It's literally forgetting how to exist. Stars in that region are winking out because the universe is forgetting they were ever there. Understanding the incomprehensible. The full briefing from the archivists took 6 hours to process. The recursive void had appeared 17,000 years ago, a sphere of non-existence expanding at the speed of causality itself. It had already consumed 400 star systems, but the destruction wasn't the primary concern. The void was spreading through conceptual space, not just physical reality. Civilizations that studied it too closely found their own existence becoming uncertain. Their histories would flicker, alternate timelines bleeding through until they couldn't remember which version of themselves was real. The Salvikian Empire sent their greatest minds to analyze the void, the archivists explained. They reported preliminary findings, then vanished from all timelines simultaneously. Not destroyed, erased, as if they had never existed. Except we remember them, and that contradiction is itself dangerous. This is a causality weapon, Dr. Volkov said, her face pale. Someone or something created a hole in the universe's ability to maintain consistent reality. Not created, Sarah corrected, studying the data more closely. Look at the fractal patterns in the void's expansion. It's not spreading randomly. It's solving an equation. The universe is dividing by zero somewhere, and reality is breaking down from that single point of impossible mathematics. The team worked for weeks, approaching the problem from every angle. They used quantum simulations that required the network's most powerful processors. They consulted with civilizations that perceived mathematics differently than humans. They even reached out to the few synthetic consciousnesses in the conversation, beings that thought in pure logic without biological constraints. Every approach failed. Every simulation either produced nonsense results or crashed entirely. And every researcher who spent too long studying the data began experiencing disturbing symptoms, forgetting their own names, questioning whether their memories were real, seeing timelines where Earth had never evolved humans. The human solution. It was Dr. Morrison who made the breakthrough, and it came from the most human of sources, stubbornness mixed with desperation. "We're approaching this wrong," he announced during a crisis meeting after another researcher had to be sedated when she forgot that space had 3 dimensions. "We're trying to solve the void like it's a puzzle. But what if it's not something to be solved? What if it's something to be endured?" Sarah looked up sharply. "Explain." "Every civilization that's tried to fix the void has approached it logically. They've tried to understand it, quantify it, find the equation that would reverse it. But humans don't always work that way. Sometimes, we just outlast problems. We endure things that should break us and keep going until the problem stops being relevant." "You're suggesting we just ignore it?" Marcus asked skeptically. "No," Morrison replied, his excitement growing. "I'm suggesting we treat it like cancer. You can't negotiate with cancer cells or convince them to stop multiplying. You endure the treatment, accept that you'll be damaged by the process, and outlast the disease." The concept was so simple that the network's greatest minds had overlooked it entirely. They had been searching for an elegant mathematical solution when the answer was biological stubbornness. Sarah began formulating a plan that would have horrified any rational civilization. Instead of trying to understand the void, they would bombard it with contradictions. Generate so many incompatible timelines, so many paradoxes, that the void would essentially choke on its own impossibility. The archivists were skeptical but desperate enough to listen. "This approach will require a consciousness to anchor the contradictions," they warned. "Someone must hold all the paradoxes in their mind simultaneously without attempting to resolve them. Every other species that has tried this has experienced immediate cognitive collapse." "But humans are really good at holding contradictory beliefs," Sarah pointed out. "We do it all the time. We believe we're insignificant specks in an infinite universe while simultaneously believing our individual lives have meaning. We accept that we'll die while making plans for decades in the future. Cognitive dissonance is practically our default state." Entering the void. The mission parameters were terrifying. Sarah would enter a deep quantum entanglement state, linking her consciousness directly to the recursive void. She would then feed it carefully constructed paradoxes, statements that were simultaneously true and false, timelines that existed and didn't exist, mathematical proofs that proved their own falsehood. The goal wasn't to fix the void but to give it indigestion, to make it spend so much computational power processing contradictions that it would stop expanding. "You'll be holding impossible concepts in your mind," Marcus warned her the night before the attempt. "Your consciousness will experience multiple conflicting realities at once. Even if it works, you might not come back the same person." "I know," Sarah replied quietly. "But that's kind of humanity's thing, isn't it? Doing impossible things and dealing with the consequences later." The procedure began at dawn. Sarah lay in the quantum chamber, surrounded by more monitoring equipment than had ever been focused on a single human consciousness. The crystalline sphere pulsed with increasing intensity as it established the connection. Then Sarah was everywhere and nowhere. She existed in 17 contradictory states simultaneously. She was alive and dead, young and old, human and something else entirely. The recursive void pressed against her consciousness like an ocean of forgetting, trying to erase her from every timeline. And she pushed back. Not with logic or mathematics, but with sheer stubborn refusal to be erased. She fed the void paradoxes faster than it could process them. Schrödinger's cat that was simultaneously observed and unobserved. Grandfather paradoxes that resolved and unresolved in quantum superposition. Self-referential statements that proved and disproved themselves in infinite loops. The void tried to make sense of it all, and in trying, it began to slow. Its expansion stuttered, faltered, stopped. The aftermath and the gift. Sarah woke up 6 days later in the medical bay, with Marcus and Volkov standing over her anxiously. Her head hurt in ways that didn't have words, and her memories felt like a shuffled deck of cards. "Did it work?" she managed to ask. "Better than work," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just stop the void. You reversed it. Reality is slowly reconstructing in the affected regions. The civilizations that were erased, they're coming back. Not all of them, and not completely, but it's happening." The archivist's message arrived that evening, carried on a priority channel that reached every consciousness in the network simultaneously. Humanity has given the conversation an unprecedented gift. Not just the solution to the recursive void, but a new understanding of consciousness itself. Logic and reason are powerful tools, but sometimes survival requires the ability to hold impossibilities without breaking. The endurance echo is more valuable than we understood. From this day forward, humans are designated as crisis specialists in the network. When the impossible must be attempted, when logic fails and desperation is required, we will call upon the species that refuses to accept defeat. Sarah read the message with mixed feelings. Pride, certainly, but also a deep weariness. Being known as the species that attempts the impossible meant they would be asked to do it again and again. "We've set a precedent," she said to Marcus. "Every time something breaks in the universe, they're going to call us." "I know," he replied. "Is that so bad?" Sarah thought about the 12 civilizations slowly reconstructing themselves, given a second chance at existence because one stubborn human refused to let reality forget them. She thought about humanity's place in the conversation, no longer the newcomers but the specialists who tackled problems others couldn't. "No," she said finally. "It's not bad. It's just very, very us." 6 months later, another crisis call came through. A dimensional rift, a temporal paradox, a civilization trapped in a logic loop they couldn't escape. Each time, humanity answered. Each time, they succeeded where reason said they should fail. Because that was the human contribution to the universe, the stubborn, irrational, beautiful refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The conversation had existed for millions of years before humans joined. But afterward, it was never quite the same. Because now it had a species that looked at the word impossible and took it as a personal challenge. And across the network, in thousands of languages from beings humanity had never met, a new phrase entered common usage. "When logic fails, call the humans. They're too stubborn to know when to quit."